continue our working day. Now we'll be talking about new climate agreement, which will become effective instead of Kyoto protocol, which was passed at Paris conference last week. The speakers are Svitlana Kolomiets, Deputy Minister of Ecology and Natural Resources of Ukraine, Iryna Savchuk, Head of the National Ecological Center of Ukraine, Mr. Vladislav Veznin, Head of Climate Department of the Ministry of Environment, and Kirill Tavlyak, the advisor to the Head of the Energy Efficiency Department. Svitlana, the floor is yours. Thank you. Good afternoon. A lot has been mentioned about new global climate agreement, but this topic is always of interest. On the 12th of December, after long negotiations, a long preparation in Paris, the new global climate agreement was signed. 195 countries participated in the process. A global climate agreement was not drafted within 2 weeks only. It was a long work that was initiated back in 2011. In 2012, the so-called Durban Platform was founded. And finally, in December this year, the agreement was approved. The agreement is not signed yet. The agreement will be open for signing starting from April next year. After that, there will be the process of ratification. We hope that our country will sign and ratify this agreement. And we will be part of that global process. A few words about the agreement and about the key issues discussed. The negotiations were very complicated. The global agreement reflects the interests of many countries. Very often these interests are very controversial. All the countries that will join the agreement will be trying to achieve it. Some countries, the countries islands, the countries which are most vulnerable, they insisted that the global objective should be 1.5 degrees, because only that will allow to maintain their countries in a safer condition. Their argument was, till we are talking about new global objective, when we come back from the conference, we may not find our lands. They will be flooded because the ocean level will go up. And these are the realities which we will face if we are not successful in fighting the climate changes. But the new global climate agreement has registered some compromise. The countries agreed that the temperature should be maintained at the level of 2 degrees Celsius, and what we need to mention, most countries submitted their expectations. And the second topic is national ambitions. What do the countries want? The countries have to put more ambitious goals. In the result of expert assessment, it was established that such actions, even if all the plans and deadlines are observed, will be able to maintain the temperature within the limit of 2.7 degrees, which is impossible. taking into account the global objective. So the parties agreed that the countries will review their annual contributions on the regular basis. What differs that agreement from Kyoto Protocol? The new principle here was applied to work of the countries. Here there is a principle from bottom up. The countries define their tasks, their plans on how they will reduce the emissions, and we hope that such more flexible mechanisms, which involves not just developed countries but developing countries as well, will help to make this agreement more effective instrument than Kyoto Protocol. Another important issue is new differentiation of the countries. This agreement is part of the UN convention. According to that, the countries are divided into several categories. There's Amendment 1, which has the list of developed countries, which includes Ukraine. There is Addendum 2, which gives the list of the donor countries, and other countries which are not included into the first list are called developing countries. Ukraine, just as an umbrella group, was against this very strict differentiation. Many of the countries which are part of developing countries are very strong, developed countries which are able to provide assistance to other countries. Among them are Singapore, Saudi Arabia, and other countries. So we are for new flexible differentiation. And now the agreement differentiates between developed and developing countries. In each case, in each period of time, they will be looking at whether the country can provide assistance or requires assistance separately. You probably heard about the expected national contribution of Ukraine. Many experts were saying that it's not too ambitious. Ukraine has bigger potential and can do more in fighting the climate changes. We need to do more, but we need a very clear strategy, and we need resources, because transition to alternative sources of energy requires financial, technical support. So we hope that we will be able to get such support for Ukraine. And that will allow us to be more ambitious in the future. If you have anything to add, dear colleagues, then I would like to invite you to take the floor. Iryna Savchuk, the representative of the civil sector, will give her assessment of these negotiations. Iryna Savchuk, National Environmental Center of Ukraine, representative of the network of NGOs. Talking about assessment of the agreement by NGOs, both Ukrainian organizations and international, that worked on this issue, welcomed this agreement. It's not ideal, but it's the best thing that could have been achieved in the sphere of political readiness of the leaders of all the countries to address the problem of climate change. We have a very ambitious global objective to keep warming at a level of less than 2 degrees, to do everything possible to keep it at the level of 1.5 degrees. All the countries have to refuse from extracted fuel and switch to 100% renewables. And this is a very complicated task. It's a shock for many countries, for many governments, presidents, the prime ministers, but this objective has been approved. Everyone agreed to that, which means that everyone understands that this is a serious problem and it is to be addressed. Because this is about life, future. These are billion of people. If the temperature goes up by 2%, 500 million will suffer. They will lose homes. They will suffer from climate change. If the temperature goes up by 3 degrees, it's about 3 billion people, which will mean irrevocable changes, drastic changes for the whole planet. The new agreement means that all the countries have to work on this scenario of the low CO2 development and provide plans to reduce emissions. And Ukraine has to resubmit its climate position. We need to reassess because what the countries submitted now, in the result we will get the warming by 3 degrees, and all countries have to review their positions. The climate policy in Ukraine is economically substantiated. We need to work on energy efficiency, make investments in energy efficient technologies. Without that, Ukraine will have big economic depression and social problems. Also, that means development of renewables. We are trying to refuse from gas in ATO zone. There are many ruined coal mines, so we have to build our future energy sector without extracted fuels. So we have no other way out as to develop our renewables. And from the economic point of view, only the experts say that only the development of renewables for the country is economically more feasible than to continue business as usual without any changes in these spheres. As to the work with the Ukrainian delegation, that was probably the first time when we had close cooperation, and we see that the new team of the ministry is more open for communication, to discussing the position. This is it. And I will be ready to answer all your questions.
First of all, I would like to thank you for such high assessment of our governmental efforts. And so our positions should be similar with in different executive authorities. What should the government do after the approval of the climate change agreement? You know that we are invited to sign the climate agreement in New York, and we think that our President Poroshenko also will be invited to New York to affix his signature to this agreement. And almost 200 countries representatives came, their leaders came to Paris, and this policy, these negotiations resulted several weeks ago in approval of climate change agreement. There are very many questions to the agreement, but because almost 200 countries, where some of them have warfare in their borders, of course it is hard to find absolute common consensus, but this climate agreement and climate policy really achieved such a tension which is even higher than the one paid to the Kyoto Protocol. But taking into account all the declarations made by the US and other countries which were not signatories of the Kyoto Protocol, we suppose that this climate change agreement will be ratified by the by the country's signatories. As concerned the next steps, we started to discuss this agreement, and we started the process of public consultations, and we have already yesterday the meeting of public council, and we are thankful to its members for consultations, to the delegation which will visit New York, and we will we will compile such an overall report, a general report, and the next step will be the Bonn meeting next year, and then Marrakesh meeting in November next year, where this agreement will be filled with more specific activities. And we hope that the national position would be liberated, and we call on our experts and professionals to provide their positions, their comments, and we would incorporate them. And the working group which would liberate the wording of Marrakesh agreements, it would incorporate experts' comments, and it's very symbolic that the representative of the state agency on energy saving and energy efficiency is here, because they are one of the responsible implementing units for 2020 through 2030. Thank you. Kirilla Tamlyak, I am an advisor to the SAEE. Thank you for the high assessment of the energy efficiency matter. Of course, this global target of 1.5 degrees Celsius limit of global warming, this target achievement would require from us to put significant common efforts on the part of all the countries to save energy resources and to shift to low carbon technologies. And within this conference, there were several global conferences founded which are focused on solutions to the problems which we mentioned today. One of them was Alliance for Building Alliance, Energy Efficiency Building Alliance, and the next was that the Ukrainian, our SAEE, headed by Mr. Savchuk, joined this alliance, and it supposes possible international initiatives to ensure within a very short period a significant reduction of emissions of greenhouse gases in the building sector. This concerns both new building projects and modernization of the old buildings. High rates of energy efficiency are supposed. What tools, what periods, what timing would be set? The decisions to be accepted later, but these are very large scale decisions which we should adopt. The discussion on about subsidies to fossil fuels is extraction. Such subsidies should be replaced with targeted subsidies to individuals. We know this program of providing compensations to low-income individuals to pay their electricity and heating bills. So this process can help us to achieve the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, and I would like to thank our delegation which was at the meeting in Paris from the Ministry of Ecology and Natural Resources, and I hope that we will be even better ready to the next meeting at the international level. I would like to tell several words about the next steps and Ukrainian membership in the negotiation. It was my first time with the climate change delegation, and as the head of it, I would like to think that we should improve our operations on international on international negotiations. We now have political turbulence. We experience it, and we also experience shuffles in the staff, and it is an impossible situation. We should bring back such experts who I was told that they have very good records of previous experience. For example, Mr. Bebeshka is very famous previously as a strong expert, and we would invite other figures, politically neutral experts to implement our policy in a continuous manner. And as concerned the framework convention on the climate change, we have the draft declaration to the president, and it has been submitted so that the presidential administration leaders will help improve our activities of our negotiations team. One more important thing is that public activists advised us that it would be good to invite at least one member from NGOs to the team which will go for international negotiations next time. I think this is a good thing for both for citizens and NGOs. We should work through such a participatory approach. Thank you.
Олег Листопов, урядовий кур'єр. Who personally will be responsible for the failure of these agreements? Because all previous international agreements were failed on climate, on other issues. There were great agreements at the international level, but when it comes to implementation in Ukraine, it's a failure. Who personally will be responsible for developing the action plan at that time frame? I believe that your first question, I will not answer that because I hope that there will be no failure. I understand why you are skeptical, why some experts are skeptical, and but we have nothing better. Just the fact that the USA, which have not ratified Kyoto Protocol, Canada, that left the Kyoto Protocol, they were active participants of this process. So let's not talk about failure, but personal responsibility. The governmental institution, governmental agency number one is the Ministry of Environment and Natural Resources, but we will not be able to do anything just by ourselves. We need to get all the sectors of economy involved into that. There should be the Ministry of Energy, the State Energy Agency on Energy Efficiency. All these agencies are to be working together. So, I personally believe that the Minister of Environment, but also there should be the effort should be made by everyone. In fact, any agreement could be non-efficient if the government does not implement it. For Ukraine, it's a big task, because now we see that the Ministry of Environment is working on climate issues, but others sort of, they don't understand it. When we talk to the Ministry of Transportation, they tell us, go to the Ministry of Environment. There should be a governmental program so that at the level of the Prime Minister, the political decision is made. Usually when it comes to discussing this strategy, the representatives of the ministries who come to discuss are not the leaders of the ministry. People have what to say, what to add. I would like to draw your attention to another process, the development of the Strategy of Sustainable Development of Ukraine. That is a UNDP project in Ukraine. Yesterday we had a meeting of the steering committee, and we understand that this Sustainable Development Strategy is very important. If in Ukraine we have a proper sustainable development strategy, which will be directed towards work on climate change issues, then we may succeed. So this year should be very important in this context.
Я хотів ще додати перше стосовно відповідальності.
Talking about responsibility, the fact that the president of Ukraine was opening the conference is of importance. Then I believe this will be very important. In the past, the Agency on Environmental Investments was working on these issues. Now this agency is being liquidated. We now have the special department in the ministry. We started working on developing the climate strategy because we don't have a climate strategy which would be approved. This will not be the document which will be implemented only by the Ministry of Environment. This is what the whole cabinet of ministers should be working on. Different ministries are to be involved into this work. They have to participate in implementation of that policy. We renewed the intersectoral commission on climate changes. In the beginning, when we set up the commission, we believed that this will be a coordinating body which will be developing and implementing the policy. Unfortunately, it doesn't work. The coordination of that is the level of the Prime Minister and the President. I hope that after this Paris conference, after the attention paid to Paris summit, I hope that the government officials now understand that this is an issue for everyone. Today, the Ministry of Environment is responsible, will draft the action plan, and we hope that the civil society will be involved into implementation. One important issue is creation of a domestic system of selling emissions. This will be one of the incentives which will help business to switch to market mechanisms. Thank you. One remark from me as to the leaders of the country. I've seen in the Twitter of Barack Obama the information that this is a very important decision. Union agency. Kyoto Protocol provided for the norm that the countries that emit more, they have to pay fines. The new Paris conference, does it provide for this?
Прокоментуй, будь ласка. Прокоментуй.
Насправді це головне питання.
This is the main question that all the experts ask. How can we I would like to mention that this is a climate agreement, and the mechanism that we used in Kyoto Protocol, there was a principle of reducing for countries which are in the list of developed countries. All other countries could just not reduce emissions but get assistance. Now this agreement is more of a framework nature. Shall, should, may. These are the words used there.
Жодним чином не прописано.
But it doesn't talk about how we will use this money, what technologies will be sold. There will be some foundation created, fund created, which will be used by developing countries, but the mechanism is not in place. I don't think that Ukraine should be looking for some privileges from selling quotas. Ukraine was selling this product very successfully in all the markets with private business, and one of the arguments why changes were introduced was that the system was not perfect. We hope that more specific mechanisms of assistance are developed, but Ukraine is an Annex 1, which has developed countries. It's mentioned that we are the country with the transitional economy, but in new agreement there are just two categories of countries, developed and developing. So next year it will be clarified which category we will be included into. And we will participate in forming the fund, in getting, irrespective of where we are, in which category we are, we will participate in forming the fund. Where is Ukraine now? Now there's no list of countries in Paris Agreement. No category 1, category 2 lists. Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Israel. These are the countries which, according to Kyoto Protocol, had no commitments to reduce, but they had the chance to get assistance. Unfortunately, Ukraine lags behind from Israel and Qatar. So this will be discussed during future negotiations. If Ukraine manages to increase the GDP and be ahead of Qatar, then this will be one situation. But we hope we will answer all the questions of everyone.
Насправді для того, щоб
In fact, to have the level of development like Qatar or Israel, I would be ready to make contributions to this fund. The market mechanisms are not prohibited by a new agreement, but specific mechanisms will be discussed at further conferences. There are no clear financial commitments for Ukraine.
в якому вона була за Кіотським протоколом, за новою угодою, ну поки що принаймні.
Ще трошки про допомогу, тобто насправді Україна
Ukraine now is getting a lot of assistance. When we assess different assistance from different institutions,
Clean Technology Fund, Україна є членом, але проекти, які були раніше, вони не імплементувалися. І знову ж таки зараз восени
Now in autumn, they submitted new list of projects. Other examples are budget assistance from European Union. And there is a mechanism if Ukraine can get money if it implements. If it doesn't implement, it doesn't get money.
і за новою угодою, і в рамках інших двосторонньої співпраці, інших механізмів кошти є. Питання
They do have money, but it's about the correct organization of the system. These should be either reforms or measures, and then we will get money. So that might be some technical assistance or some loans which are to be implemented.
С ваших слов я хотел бы уточнить. Вы сказали, что 22
You mentioned that on the 22nd of April next year, the leaders of countries will be invited to sign the agreement. Before that, the parliament should first signing, then the procedure of ratification by parliaments.
в нашей стране и
Taking into account what's happening in our country, do you believe that the parliament, it is realistic that the parliament will ratify the agreement? It's the question to the ministry and representative of the agency. It's difficult to give you some answer. We did not talk to factions, to MPs. We will need to give this agreement to them. After that, we'll be able to assess chances, but we hope it will be ratified. We want to be part of civilized world. I would like to add, in the beginning I said the agreement has to be signed and ratified. So till 2020 it should be ratified.
Не закінчиться тільки Марракешем, це будуть ще зустрічі щорічні, тобто навіть не просто щорічні, а це постійно діючий процес, в якому буде визначатися Україна.
будете получать какие-то выгоды от этой,
Так,
как
це-
страна.
так, після цього тільки буде зрозуміло, чи можна буде ратифікувати, чи буде вона там буде ратифікована чи ні. Зберемо ми аргументів, зберемо ми стільки голосів, але головне питання, що ми
The main question is, we are from the Ministry of Environment, and we believe this is a global issue. People understand that the countries may disappear. The main thing is to find different mechanisms. Market, non-market. Maybe there will be the mechanism that we cannot even think about. I believe there will be arguments and understanding, and we hope that the country will ratify.
Вернуться к ожидаемому взносу Украины, более конкретизировать, вот что Украина предлагает, насколько сократить выброс там и так далее.
Can you specify what Ukraine propose about the emissions reduction?
викидів 60 рівень.
The level of 60% of the basis of 2009. We have now the emissions more than 40%. We can trade this our excess we have several scenarios of development, and we focused on 5 of them, and the latter one was most ambitious. It was lower than 40% if the GDP grows. We do not have now the Ministry of Energy representatives here, and in the framework of international assistance, we do not have the strategy approved yet in Ukraine, which would forecast some events after 2020. The presidential strategy has time until 2020. It is very short-term horizon of planning in Ukraine, and in order to comply with international standards, we should have longer-term horizons of planning. So we will review this indicator. It coincides with the European countries' position. 60% of 1990s indicate here in Ukraine we have 40% because our development has dropped. We have recession. So our indicator is good because of recession, but not because of replacement of gas with other fuels or so we need the political will of country's leadership, and upon taking into account all the factors, we can demonstrate more ambitious strengths. And at the civil society, we have criticized the goals of Ukraine because it supposes growing emissions and it does not include the scenarios that have been selected. It does not include any political changes and any energy efficiency, and it does not include even the Ukraine's requirements, the Ukraine's commitments to the energy community. This international commitments of Ukraine, even they are not incorporated in the approved scenario. And looking into the national strategy wording, we can say that the trend is continued till 2030 on energy efficiency improvement and use of renewable energy. Ukraine then could reduce greenhouse emissions by 15% if the renewable energy and energy efficiency improvement policy is maintained. Ukraine can reduce greenhouse gas emissions instead of increasing them. So we hope that the new energy strategy would be adopted because we have already national action plan on energy efficiency, and we hope that the energy efficiency would be improved in Ukraine. I hope so because the NGOs critics is absolutely fair, but the government should work on the basis of already established institutions and commitments. The government cannot base their efforts on the not approved national strategy. As soon as the national strategy is adopted, we should review our scenario. I would like to add that I would not pay too much attention to this, and this is a little bit in the past. Our country has no barriers to improve energy efficiency and to use renewable energy sources. And here, SAEE has been putting many efforts, and we are doing all our best to come close to the goals. We should change the paradigm of thinking. We should not think of our country as of development country. We should think what can we propose to contribute to the global efforts to help the world to achieve the ambitious goals of preventing climate change. I have the following question. We shall have a kind of pause till 2020, and what is the ministry's position, the Doha amendment? What risks and benefits do you see? And the second question is the matter of annulment of some rules supposed by the Paris Agreement. What would be the steps of Ukraine? The first question about the Doha Amendment, and you know that Ukraine took such a strict position in the negotiations during recent years, and the decision adopted in Doha it was not to the benefit of Ukraine in full, but during the Paris negotiations we agreed that the articulation was elaborated such a word in which is more beneficial for Ukraine, and Ukraine would not bear economic losses due to that amendment any longer, and more flexible mechanisms of Kyoto Protocol can be used now by Ukraine. I don't know how it would be working, but I would like to say it should be ratified first, and we are compiling now the feasibility study. We shall then pass a decision. This mechanism would be interesting, and it will help Ukraine to contribute to the national target. And I would vote for this proposal. That would be the national government's decision, and then the ratification should take place. I don't know what decision would be adopted by the parliament. Of course, the decisions should be implemented then. This is just a technical issue with given the register from one ministry to another ministry, it should be transferred to the responsibility of the other ministry. Union agency has one more question, the last one, about the energy efficiency. As concerns the subsidies, what is your point of view about the efficiency of subsidies in Ukraine in terms of energy efficiency promotion? In Ukraine, we have now program initiated by SAEE, and it is payable through through three banks when energy efficient materials are bought, then people and entities may receive compensations of up to 70% of cost of such materials. When our partners from France they heard about this program, they were pleasantly surprised. The program have been in operation for several months, and it and about several billions of money have been invested already. Despite those contributions from the government, according to information which I have, certain money would be carried forward to the next year, and this program would be extended, and compensations are paid also to people, to individuals who can't pay their electricity and heating bills, and we have a very big discrepancy between the salaries and the salaries amounts and the bills amounts. So the money which are allocated from the budget, this is one amount, and talking about the heating period, we do not have feedback. We don't know how big would be the amount of compensations.
Дивившись на те, що відбудеться в цьому опалювальному сезоні з субсидіями, уряд може разом з парламентом дещо відкоригувати цю пропорцію, наприклад, зменшити субсидії як варіант, да? Тобто, наприклад, і збільшити державну програму щодо відшкодування відсотків, адже вона вже працює, буде удосконалюватися далі. Тобто це такий процес, все в порядку.
Дуже дякую. Ще я бачу, багато запитань насправді залишилося. Я думаю, ми вже в новому році в більш такому дискусійному форматі круглого столу проведемо ще обговорення кліматичної угоди, і що це значить для України, як далі рухатися. Дякую дуже, пані Світлано, Ірина, Владислава, Крила. Дякую, що прийшли, більш так детально розповіли і на деталях зупинилися. Колеги, наступний наш брифінг буквально за кілька хвилин.